Hi, I'm Rabbi Phil Cohen. In June of 2025, I traveled to Israel, hoping to meet with rabbis and talk with them about their lives in the rabbinate, mainly in Israel. It goes without saying that I've been deeply interested in Israel for as long as I can remember. Its people, its arguments, its constantly shifting present. But this time, I wanted to listen in a somewhat different way. I wanted to hear the stories of Israeli rabbis, why they chose this calling, what sustains them, what they have learned, and what they hope for specifically in the Israeli context. And I was very lucky. I met with men and women from different denominations, different stages of life, different corners of the country. My plan was to visit them in their homes, to sit across from them and talk face to face. Unfortunately, the week I arrived, Israel entered a 12-day clash with Iran. I ended up conducting all of my interviews from my Airbnb on Zoom. Incoming missiles interrupted one interview as my subject and I both fled to shelter. Even on Zoom, however, the conversations, all of them, were rich, revealing, and deeply human. Something unexpected came out of that experience. Originally, I had planned to speak with rabbis all around the world for this podcast. Maybe I still will going forward. But for now, I'm staying with Israeli rabbis. Their stories and Israel's stories are bound up together in very interesting and creative ways, and I find that connection endlessly fascinating. That, then, is what this podcast is about. The lives, the questions, the faith of those who serve the Jewish people, and the God with whom we live in covenant across our shared history. I am Rabbi Phil Cohen, and I am a small part of that story. Don Cashman retired to Israel after a full career as a pulpit rabbi in the United States, in Albany, New York mostly. He and I spent time together as rabbinical students at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York City. Our conversation is as much about his career in the States as his Aliyah. Our conversation was interrupted by incoming missiles from Iran, which unusually threatened both Tel Aviv, where I was located, and Jerusalem, where Don lives. So my interview subject at the moment is Rabbi Don Cashman, who was one of my classmates back at HUC. We both graduated in 1983, May of 1983. And I was just reminiscing with him before I turned on the recording, things that I remembered about him and our relationship. I guess I want to start back that far. Let's start even farther back. A question that I get asked and continue to get asked, that I've gotten asked so many times I find it annoying, but I'm going to ask you the same question anyway, which is, what is it about your background that helped you make the decision to become a rabbi? Let me start back that.
I grew up in a religious Reform Jewish home. So, we lit candles and we did Kiddush, and most of the time, or frequently at least, my parents went to synagogue on Friday night. I had the option at a certain point of going or not going. And, I went and we did things. But it was, certainly in a Reform Jewish manner. We had our religious school was on Shabbat, was on Saturday. And after that, I'd often...
Where did you grow up?
Newburgh, New York, which I tell people is on the west bank of the Hudson, about 60 miles due north of New York City.
Okay.
My mother was born there. My great-grandparents moved there, I'm told, in 1908 when my grandfather was a boy.
Okay. So continue.
Yeah. So that was the kind of home I grew up in. And, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be president. But back during the Jack Kennedy days. And then eventually I kind of grew up in junior high and liked, mixing stuff down in the basement, with my chemistry set. So I decided I wanted to be a chemist. My older brother said, no, you don't want to be a chemist. You want to be a chemical engineer, So I said, oh, okay, I want to be a chemical engineer. But, this was late 60s, early 70s. By that point, what did chemical engineers do? They designed, napalm and better bombs and stuff like that. So I didn't want to do that anymore. So I didn't want to be that, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I guess around the time that I was 13 or 14, we were in a religious school assembly, and the rabbi asked, he rattled off a sentence in Hebrew and asked, who knew what it meant? Well, I'd go to services a lot, and I knew the prayer book. So, I knew exactly what it meant. About, a week or two later, he sent me these 2 recruiting pamphlets from HUCJIR, like, so you want to be a rabbi? And like, I don't know, whoever thought about this? But if I threw them in the drawer, and every time I'd open the drawer, they'd be there, haunting me or taunting me or whatever, just reminding me. And, eventually, as I guess I was in ninth grade, I realized I liked doing Jewish things. I liked studying. I was always, I guess, a ham. My father's master's was in speech and drama. Mm-hmm. So he pushed me along I was one of the local kids in a professional theater. When they needed kids, they'd call me. So I liked audiences and stuff like that. So the rabbinate kind of put it all together, doing the Jewish stuff, and I could have an audience, and it was respectable. It was contributing to the public good. So once I kind of it crystallized for me around the age of 16, it was full speed ahead.
Really? So by the time you entered college, you were already oriented toward finishing up and going into the rabbinate. Where'd you go to college?
I was at Boston University.
Uh-huh. So by the time you got there, I guess, by the time we were in college, so Jewish studies was already up and running. So it was probably pretty. Did you major in Jewish studies at BU?
Well, I majored in religion and eventually got to specialize in Jewish study. When I started there, they didn't have much of a Jewish studies program, but it got built over time. They brought in some great people who were going to be great, people who were already great and people who were going to be great. Everett Fox started teaching just before he got his doctorate. Uh-huh. My junior, I passed up a junior year abroad here in Israel because they were bringing as the first Andrew W. Mellon Professor of the Humanities, Gershom Scholem. Uh-huh. So I got to study with Scholem, and the TA for Scholem was Danny Matt. Uh-huh. And he was also working on his doctorate at that point. So he is another person who went to greatness afterwards. Nachum Glatzer came to BU because they had mandatory retirement at Brandeis.
Yeah, so BU had a habit of doing that. The Glatzer, and there was somebody else, and then my advisor when I was doing doctoral work at Brandeis, Marvin Fox, there's still compulsory retirement at 70.
Yeah,
because he was going to start his third academic career, but unfortunately he got sick, so he never got to pick up that part of his career. But yeah, so Brandeis got rid of Glatzer, and he made a home for himself for a while at BU. That's nice.
Sure. And then finally, my senior year, the next Andrew W. Mellon Professor of the Humanities was Elie Wiesel. Uh-huh. So, first semester, there were 120 of us in a classroom on the history of Jewish persecution. And second semester, there were 25 of us in his office reading a Hasidic text in Hebrew.
Uh-huh. So, yeah. And then he ended up, he was there. I don't know if he was full time or not. I don't really remember, but he was there for a good long time, at least as a part-time professor.
He came in. He flew up one day a week. Back in the day, Eastern had a shuttle. He'd fly up on in the morning and teach his class and meet with people, and then fly back. Yeah. And he did that for years and years and years until he stopped teaching. but
Yeah.
for years and years and years.
All right. So let's shift to HUC-JIR. So I guess you and I were the first full class to be at the building of West 4th and Broadway, which is almost no more, as you probably know.
I understand. Yeah.
But I'm going to just talk a little bit about that. We'll move into your professional life as a rabbi. But I'd be interested in you reflecting a bit on your time there, faculty, friends, the atmosphere, what it was like to be a village.
Well, I was at the 68th Street the last year we were there. I started a year before you. My year in Israel was 77, 78.
Oh, okay. We were in Israel together.
No, we were not in Israel together.
Right. Did you take a year off, or how was it?
Yeah.
The same year. Okay. So you ended up you started at Stephen S. Wise.
Yeah. Next to Stephen S. Wise.
Yeah.
JR there on 68th Street. That year, 90% of the student body lived on the Upper West Side. When they moved down to the village, within 2 or 3 years, 75% of the student body lived in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So that first year I lived up there on the Upper West Side. And then I was in Brooklyn and Park Slope with almost everybody else for the remaining years.
Yeah.
It was tough because we all had jobs. So between all the courses we had and doing the job and doing the transportation to the jobs, it was a very draining bunch of years. It was exhausting.
We all had. Most of us had like 2 or 3 part-time jobs, and maybe eventually by the 4th or 5th year got one solid full-time, one solid position. I remember it was very hard. And that was a famous element of life in the New York school. Cincinnati. Yeah. Went to Cincinnati. It was cheaper and it was easier in that regard. But you didn't get to live in New York City, which is
right.
Going to the New York school.
Right.
So some memories about your time there.
Oh, I try and forget about it. I know it was a long program. It was 5 years, the program. And if you'd asked me then, I said, why do we have to study modern Hebrew literature? But later on in my rabbinate, I think some of the things that I viewed with the greatest fondness and often were practical things were studying the poetry of Leah Goldberg and Zelda. Uh-huh. Which, at that point, when I was studying it, it didn't mean a lot. But later on, it did. Also, the advanced Hebrew grammar. Now that I'm living in Israel, I'm glad I have all that grammar because we took Ulpan here. And at the level we were in, there was no grammar because we knew everything already, which was true. But there was just so much to learn, really, so much for rabbis to learn.
Yeah, totally. But you gravitated toward Bible. I mean, I remember that was something you really liked, and you did your thesis with Harry Orlinsky. So like I told you before I hit record, I took courses with him. I took an additional course with him in translation. Had a few chats with him outside of class. And so one of my regrets was that I didn't pursue getting to know him any better. In retrospect, he seemed like a pretty accessible kind of guy. But so if you have some reminiscences about Harry, Dr.
Well, sure. I knew that I wanted to study Bible. And when I was in college, I read a number of books by Samuel Sandmel, who was in Cincinnati, who specialized in Hellenistic literature and as well as Bible, and Orlinsky in New York. And I was going back and forth, where do I go? Where do I apply? Which was my first choice. But as an undergraduate, when I was studying with Nachum Glatzer at Boston University, for one of his courses, he gave us a list of books to choose to read, and one of them was Orlinsky's Ancient Israel, Cornell University Press, 1954. And that book, opened up my eyes to the Bible and the world of the Bible. It's like, I want to study with Harry Orlinsky. Uh-huh. I remember when I flew down on the Eastern shuttle from Logan to, I guess it was LaGuardia for my interview. I knew by reputation Orlinsky was a big baseball fan. I didn't care much about sports, but I figured, well, he might be on the committee. I should find out what's going on today in sports. So I read on the way down. I read the sports page, and sure enough, he's at the interview. The entire faculty is at the interview, and one person wanted to know, how did you prepare for the interview today? And the fact is, I didn't really prepare for the interview. So finally, I had to admit, well, what I did do was read the sports page on the way down. And then Dr. Orlinsky says, I didn't really sit at these interviews, but I did today. So that was my first conversation with him. But I took all the courses that he offered. But because he was emeritus, he was a professor emeritus, even though he was teaching, he would only take thesis students who knew either German or Greek. And I'd taken Greek in college. Mm-hmm. So, I took one semester of advanced classical Greek. It was 2 semesters smushed into one. So I nagged him into letting me do my thesis with him. And that's really how it worked. So he gave me one topic and I kind of worked on it a little bit. But then during the summer that I was doing my research before my senior year, my mother died. Uh-huh. And things were kind of hectic. And then he offered me another topic, comparing translations. So I switched to that. My first one had been on grammatical gender, and basically certain Hebrew nouns had both, or appeared in both masculine and feminine. You have orchim and orchot, or derachim and derachot, and why were they in both? But instead, I went to comparing 6 modern translations. And
that's an interesting topic. I took that was the extra course I took with him. He had this interesting course on translations, and to this day, when I've got a Bible class that's kind of attentive and we're meeting in person, it's harder to do on Zoom, which has become the dominant environment since COVID. I'd like to have 3 or 4 translations in front of us for precisely and it's a kind of, I guess I picked that up from Orlinsky, and you kind of look at how different translators deal with words. Uh-huh. And try and come up with what may be the most efficacious word that in that context. But so as an advisor, I don't know how often you met with him and so forth, but how was he to work with as an advisor?
Well, he'd tell you to go write out this verse and compare this particular biblical verse or passage from the 6 translations you're working in. And so I'd submit, 2 or 3 or 6 pages to him, and he'd mark them up, and I'd do a rewrite. And then I'd hand him the rewrite, and he'd send it back to me for another rewrite. And finally, after the first, giving me the 4th rewrite, I said, if we keep doing rewrites, I'm not going to get anywhere. So, okay, finally, I made progress and I got stuff done. And, just as I did stuff, I'd hand it in. I had total access because he didn't have any other thesis students. Sometimes I'd drop stuff off at his apartment on the Upper West Side.
Yeah, like that. All right, so you got through HUCA, and you ended up in Miami, right? That was your first location.
My first pulpit was in Miami, Temple Israel of Greater Miami. We were so large, we had 2 buildings 20 miles apart.
Uh-huh.
We had services at both on Friday nights. All the B'nai Mitzvah were held at the downtown building, the main building. I had two junior youth groups, one in each place, and one senior youth group, which was down at the main building. The kids came down there for that. And I ran the bar mitzvah program.
Uh-huh.
And we were both, I ran a service every Friday. We had 2 kids. We had a cantor, and we had, first she was a student. She flew down every week. And then after her ordination, she was assistant cantor.
Uh-huh. So all right. So that's a particular, you might say, classical direction for a graduating rabbi to do. You become an assistant rabbi and move on to your own temple. But so reflect on your life. How many years were you there?
I was there 2.
Okay, so reflect on your life. Those 2 years working as an assistant rabbi, doing all this kind of stuff in a big city with a big Jewish population. But I want some reflections, good and bad, about being the rabbi in a huge congregation. I assume it was huge.
Oh, it was huge, sure. I think it was 1,300 families at that point. And then it was down from it had been like 1,800 families. Now it's fewer than 200 families. And at the end of this month, they're actually sunsetting the building.
Uh-huh.
They're going to be a homeless congregation. But that's because downtown Miami and the area has changed. There were a couple of things that I recall that were significant to me that made me not want to be in a big congregation anymore. I did 60 funerals in 2 years.
Uh-huh.
That's an average of 1 every 11 days.
Right.
And there was one 10-day period, I did 5 of them, including a 36-year-old guy who'd been murdered.
Uh-huh.
Left 2 little boys, like 6 and 8. And right before I left town, word was starting to come out that maybe he'd gotten set up by his business partner.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how it played out. That's all I remembered. You couldn't really plan your life because any moment you might be told you might have to drop everything you'd planned because the funeral took priority. And the senior rabbi, being a wise and experienced rabbi.
Who was that?
His name was Haskell Burnett. He knew when people tended to die. So he would always be on vacation, it seemed like, at the very busy time. Now, I know he didn't plan it that way. It just seemed like it was that way to me. But in of those 60 funerals I did, I think only one of them did I know beforehand.
Uh-huh.
So I decided that was not the kind of rabbi I wanted to be.
Right.
Now, it was also, on the other hand, very good because in school, at least, we were told to value, or we were trained to value, or brainwashed to value your assistantship by how often you got to preach.
Uh-huh.
Because some rabbis, the senior rabbi, no, you're not going to get to preach. But here I was on the pulpit myself every Friday night.
Uh-huh.
So the acknowledged method was one sermon would be given twice. You'd give it at both places. So it was kind of hard to tie into the Torah portion closely, but you fudge things enough you could. So I remember that. I remember my congregants were all over Dade County. So I would, on a regular week, visit up to 7 different hospitals. And I would judge how good a hospital was by the quality of the parking place they provided for clergy.
Uh-huh.
The best was Miami Heart Institute, which allowed you to park underground out of the sun along with the doctors. And the worst was a North Miami Hospital, which didn't have any clergy parking.
Uh-huh.
So
you did that for 2 years, and I guess you had to have known by the beginning of your second year that you were going to look to move on.
Oh yeah,
because the hunting season starts late fall, so you had to know you were looking to move on.
Yeah.
And you got lucky. You landed a position that was your only second position.
That's right. And on top of it, you see, it's my native turf. I was in Albany, New York, which was 80 miles from where I grew up.
Uh-huh. What's the name of the temple?
Temple was B'nai Shalom Reform Congregation. I had, trying to remember, I had done an interview with a congregation in Brooklyn and didn't get the job. And then I applied for this one. And the acceptance came the same day that I had another phone interview, which I then canceled because this was my home turf, and I felt really good about the congregation. It was a nice small one. I think they said they had 106 families at this point. By the time I got there, the real number seemed to be about 99 families. Uh-huh. But over the years I was there, and I was there 35 years, we were up to 190 families. Uh-huh. Over time, it came back down because congregations grew, and then they came down. It had to do with the size of the baby boomer cohort and their children.
All right, so 35 years. I guess the first thing I want to know is, though the contrast is obvious, how did that play out? You left a 1,200 family congregation where you were the assistant rabbi, and you were the single senior rabbi at a congregation of 100 families. So what was that like?
Well, I never thought of myself as the senior rabbi.
I think that's the language the CCAR uses. But
senior/solo. But you know, the rabbi. I was the rabbi. Well, it's nice. It took a while because the congregation was only 14 years old when I got there.
Uh-huh.
It had split off in 1971 from the other large Reform congregation in town, which in fact had been founded by Isaac Mayer Wise, the founder of American Reform Judaism, before he went to Cincinnati and created everything there.
Yeah, but it wasn't at that congregation he got into a fight with the president on Yom Kippur? I don't think that's that's a true story.
Yes, there had been one congregation in 1846 that he became the rabbi of, Temple Beth El in Albany. And from the beginning, he started agitating in reformist ways, mixed seating, things like that, stuff in English or German or English. And at one point, he was on leave, I think, for illness. And he actually did a job interview somewhere, and word got back, which, you don't do when you're under contract. It was a placement issue. So they tried to fire him, both for that and for his reformist ways. And eventually, the congregational meeting used to be the week before Rosh Hashanah, because what did people do? Who were the congregants? The congregants often were traveling salesmen, and they would all come back home for the holidays. So that was the time to have the annual meeting. So they called him in the week before Rosh Hashanah, and they said, Rabbi, you're fired. Now, to me, it seems really stupid to fire your rabbi the week before Rosh Hashanah, but, that's who they were. But he got up the next day and, went there. He writes about it in his reminiscences, his memoirs. And he says, the music of Sulzer's Ein Kamocha by Elohim. So the music comes up, and he gets up from his place to open the ark, and the president pushed him away and knocked off his hat, and the fist fight starts. This is Rosh Hashanah 1850. 10 days later, on Yom Kippur, there are now 2 congregations in Albany. The new one, the old one, Beth El, House of God, and the new one, which they have named Anshe Emeth, People of Truth. And they go on for 4 more years. Then he gets called to Cincinnati. He goes to Cincinnati because it's bigger and pays more. And 35 years later, the 2 of them merge because they're both the same socio-economic group. They're both German Jews, as opposed to later on the Russian Jews or the Polish Jews. They were all married within, the families were all intermarried. So they formed one, and they took the Beth from Bethel and the Emeth from Anshe Emeth and became Beth Emeth, House of Truth. And that was the only congregation from 1885 until 1971, when Beth Emeth decided to fire its rabbi who'd been there for 15 years. He got up. They called him in. They didn't call him in. They made an appointment to see him, and they said, Rabbi, we're not going to renew your contract. He got up on the pulpit on Friday night, said, ladies and gentlemen, I've been fired. And he walked off the pulpit. And so there was a big to-do because the people didn't know anything was problematic. People liked him. If there was a problem, why didn't they know about it? So there was a split. And my people split off and founded this congregation. He elected him as their rabbi. And he was their rabbi for 10 months before they found out why he got fired in the first place. He was kind of an ornery guy. And they hired somebody else who was a rabbi for 2 years, and then he left. And then the next guy who was there for 4 years, and he left, and then me, and I was there.
And so why did you succeed with these other 3?
That's a good question.
We can talk about that in a number of ways. This is a very interesting conversation. Up until now, my subjects haven't been pulpit rabbis, and this is very interesting. Exploring your life, the pulpit, what it's like to be the rabbi in a relatively small congregation. I'd also like to get into. I hope if there's any relevance to it. You're in the state capitol. I mentioned
we'll get there.
Yeah. Totally.
Actually, my numbers are off. The second rabbi was there for 4 years, and the third guy was there for 8 years.
I was a little bit. Okay.
It was double. Then I stayed. Part of it was the founders were classical reformers. My predecessor fought some of the battles, and he suffered. He suffered because of it. He got fired because of it. So he didn't wear a robe. He was involved. Hopefully lots of people are going to listen to this podcast. So let's not take it for granted that people are going to know what classical reform means. I'm not always sure I know what classical reform is, and I'm a historian of the movement. So fill us in a little bit about that. What does it mean to say the synagogue was a classical reform? Well, when I came there, they had we had 2 musicians who alternated on Friday night. A guy with his guitar and a non-Jewish woman who sang with an organist. So I was not comfortable with the non-Jew singing the liturgy. So by the end of the year, we phased her out. But the organist I was stuck with because she was a congregant. Actually, she also wasn't Jewish. She'd been married to a Jewish congregant who died, but she was treated as a congregant. Eventually, she retired and moved out of town. And so I was able to phase out the organ because the newer people joining the congregation were not from that Reform background of organ and the Old Union prayer book and rabbis in robes, who'd been that was the founding aesthetics of the congregation. The new Reform liturgy started with Gates of Prayer in 1975, which this congregation did not adopt till let me think, till around 1980, and they were only using it part-time. They were alternating between the Union Prayer Book and the new Gates of Prayer. When by the time I came, the president was one of the new guys, and he was happy to do away with the Old Union Prayer Book and do away with the organ. And those were the new people coming in. So the old timers felt they were getting pushed out. But my predecessor, as I said, he fought those battles and he suffered because of it. But I was able to come in with something new and move them to who they were. Mm-hmm. But when one of the founders would eventually leave and go back to what I used to call the mother church, the church, the synagogue they broke away from, a founder was worth 2 or 3 of regular Jews. So, it was always a terrible thing when a founder left because they were greater than everybody else.
I found a similar thing with like past presidents. I had an experience once where, this is not my interview, but in one of my positions where I was still relatively new and didn't quite know, I was really still getting sort of acclimated to, because I'd come from Hillel, what it meant to be in the pulpit. One of the congregants lost a parent, and the senior rabbi did the funeral, and the cantor did the music. And I figured, all right, that's them, and I'm doing other funerals in the congregation. A few weeks go by, and I get an angry letter from the guy, that I didn't even come to the Shiva Minyan, which I understand. I mean, if I'd been better educated, acclimated, I would have gone to the Shiva Minyan. But he was really ticked off of it. Because why? Because he was a past president. That I didn't respect that position. But all right, so the founders are leaving. But I want to press you a little bit more about this, because I think this kind of change in this series I hope to be producing. I want to talk about ideological aesthetic changes in congregational life. So classical reform, no yarmulkes, I take it, using union book, robes. Was there anything theologically different in a reform classical mode as compared to when you start using the new prayer book and you start wearing a yarmulke and you throw away the robe? Are the differences only aesthetic, or is there more to it than that?
The aesthetics speak very loudly to those folks. You talk about yarmulkes. The policy on yarmulkes when I got there was they needed to be kept in the office and given out to people only if they asked for them. So I put them in a drawer marked authorized personnel only. One of my colleagues in a similar congregation not far away said everybody in the congregation was allowed to wear on their head whatever they wanted to wear, except the rabbi. The rabbi would be, you cannot wear one. I could wear one, but nobody else could unless they brought their own or asked for one. It was a real nuisance. I'd go in to start the service and say, "Oh, Rabbi, can you get me a yarmulke?" Well, I got to drop everything and go into the office and grab a yarmulke. It's a pain in the neck.
Yeah. Did that situation eventually change? Had a bunch of yarmulkes outside the sanctuary?
Oh, yeah. Whatever we could do to facilitate people's personal spirituality. If it meant a lot to them to have their head covered, please let us help. Part of it is also, who's on the ritual committee. You don't have to have any knowledge. You just got to have a big mouth.
Well, that's, I will understand that, having served a lot of different ritual committees.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're there. It's 100 families. You're moving it a little bit toward a kind of more normative, what would have been normative in the 1980s, reform modality. And you're not doing 60 funerals in 2 years. So what are you doing?
What am I doing? We had the distinction of having all our religious school 1 day a week. The other reform was 2 days a week. The conservatives were still 3 days a week. People would join us for the 1 day a week.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Okay. And we had a program that was jam-packed from like 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the room at that point, we had 3 classrooms and a social hall. And the social hall would be all partitioned off. So we would have maybe 2 classes in the social hall and another one in the sanctuary and in the classrooms. And we'd switch and we'd have shifts. Eventually we got it down into a good system with different shifts, different people coming different times of the day. And I was the bar mitzvah person. So I set the date. I worked with the kid. I did the tutoring for the Torah and the Haftarah and the brachot, the prayers, and the Dvar Torah and the service and everything. So I would get them at the end of the whole process. So it was in my personal interest to make sure they came into the bar or bat mitzvah process with as good a Hebrew as possible. So we started teaching all the blessings and prayers in the Hebrew school, and we started giving them standing reading assignments. So if you were in the Gimel class, you had in September, you had to read this prayer, in October, this prayer, in November, this prayer. And the Hebrew class teacher would have some high school aides, and the aide would listen to the kids drill on it. And eventually the teacher would pass them on it. And eventually I would pass on. So the kid could not graduate that Hebrew class into the next one until he or she had mastered the particular prayers needed for that. And by that point, their Hebrew got better and better. So eventually, when our Hebrew school was getting smaller, we saw the baby boomers were at the end of their childbearing, or the children of the baby boomers were diminishing down, and we merged with another religious school. The 2 conservative synagogues had one joint religious school at this point. And I know one of their teachers was, "Oh my God, we're going to get those kids from B'nai Shalom, from the Royal Reform congregation that has only 1 day a week. They won't know anything." And it turns out my kids read Hebrew better than their kids because we pushed them. We did, and I just feel very good about that.
Yeah, totally.
So, but I had to work hard at that. I had to administer the program and hire the teachers and provide the materials. So, and at one point we were doing 2025 B'nai Mitzvah a year. So every day for a multi-year period, from the time the kids got out of school at, say, 3:15 until 6 o'clock, 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Wednesday was my day. No, I did Wednesday. It was Tuesday. It was Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. I would hear kids by phone appointment.
Uh-huh.
This was before COVID. You could do live, but in the 80s and the 90s and the beginning of the 20th century, all the parents were working. It wasn't like when I was growing up, where the moms were homemakers and would spend their time chauffeuring kids all over the place. The kids would go home after school, and the kids would have phone appointments with me. And, I gave them a lecture, the kid and the parent, when it started, that, you still want to get up and say, today I am a Jewish adult. Part of being an adult is keeping track of your own calendar. So we're going to set an appointment, and you're going to keep it, and you're going to call me. And if you forget to call me when you remember, and we'll reschedule. But if you fall behind, you fall behind. Assume you've learned the assignment for this week correct, and go on and do 2 more sentences. They would learn at the rate of 2 sentences per week. So this is what I did with my afternoons. In the evenings, I did meetings, all the congregational meetings, an occasional federation or community committee. I would teach adults in the evening. And during the day, that's when I would go to hospitals or plan my lessons or go to other meetings or plan for my meetings. So that's what I did.
Yeah, good. So it was a perfectly Martin Buberian life. All life is meeting. Never mind. It's an old joke. It's an old joke. So you're there in the state capitol. Maybe get a little more granular about what that life was like. State capitol or federation. What were the issues? Let's hold on a second. So before we were so rudely interrupted by a missile coming from Iran, well, you were going to tell a little bit about your life as a congregational rabbi, in Albany, out in the community, federation, government. Maybe you did some work with Hillel. I don't know, but so what are some of the things that occupied your time there over those 30-some years?
Well, because we were in the state capitol, we had a unique opportunity to influence what went on. So sometimes it would be some of the local people from across religious boundaries. Mostly, I started working with what was then called the Religious Coalition for Abortion Rights.
Uh-huh.
So we would, abortion was already safe and legal in New York from 1970, even before Roe v. Wade. But we spent many years trying to put something in place in case Roe v. Wade got knocked down, which, of course, eventually it did. To move it out of criminal law and move it to health law. So occasionally we would have organized excursions to visit our state representatives, and eventually got involved with Family Planning Advocates of New York State, which was a statewide organization of representatives from the various local and regional Planned Parenthoods. So eventually I joined the board of that organization. I was on what do you call it in English? The executive committee. At one point I was on the board and the chair of the board of our local Planned Parenthood, Upper Hudson Planned Parenthood. So we would bring people together from all over the state. I got to see some of my rabbinic colleagues from downstate in the western part of the state who would come in, and we would go from to our various state senators and assembly members to talk about the legislation that was before us, before them, that we were advocating for. Did some stuff on gay rights as well within the city and in the states. So it was a great opportunity there in Albany to do that.
Okay. So, and ask you a question. What are you studying these days?
Pardon me?
What are you studying
right now?
Yeah. What are you
right now?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm working on blues from the 20s and 30s on my guitar, and some mid-career Dylan, but really I'm doing the whole 60 years worth of Dylan stuff. Up on 60, 70 years worth of Dylan stuff, both on guitar, and I'm playing more banjo. Part of it is in the pulpit, I ended up doing the music by the time I left a quarter to a third of the time. And anytime I wanted to play, it was, learn new music for the synagogue or get ready, prepare some old music for the synagogue. But I didn't get to play all the folk stuff I'd been playing before that. So now I'm basically getting back into my folky self. Right. Yesterday, because of the ongoing incident with Iran, the synagogues were closed. So when I was in the States last month, I picked up my copy of, let me pick it up here, the Kol Beseder anthology. The complete works of Jeff Klepper and Danny Freelander, and played for an hour from, they have a list of songs for Shabbat morning. So I went through half the Shabbat morning stuff. I've had some back and forth with Jeff about today and yesterday about some of one of the old songs that came through. I said, "Oh, that one's from 1972. Isn't that like the second song you ever wrote?" It turns out it's like the third song. But so I'm playing not so much Jewish music as I did those days, but working on the blues. So that's what I'm studying. I also up until about March, for the last year, I've been reading Torah in our synagogue about every 6 weeks. I stopped because they instituted about a year ago a monthly Devar Torah in English. And there's a lot of retired rabbis in this particular synagogue. And I'd put the guy who was in charge of it off for a month. And finally, I realized my 70th birthday was on the Saturday morning of one of those English sermons. So I volunteered to do that. So I took some time off from reading Torah to work on that sermon. So, but now that's done. And I should be back on the schedule for reading Torah, but we're moving next week. So I'm allowing myself to be occupied with moving for another week or two.
So here's a trivia question. Last week was the 50th anniversary of a famous album, actually two, but one I don't remember the name of. Do you happen to, you know what I'm talking, you know what I'm talking about?
The 50th anniversary of Highway 61 Revisited.
I think Blonde on Blonde.
Oh, Blonde on Blonde.
Yeah, but you're in the right ballpark. I think it was Blonde on Blonde.
Okay. There was an anniversary of Highway 61. I'm trying to think of what it was. Anyway, okay.
But all right, so you're in Israel now for 2.5 years. Two questions. What was the brought you to Israel? Why'd you decide to make Aliyah, you and your family? And the second question is, what have you been doing since you got there? But the first is, what made you want to go to Israel?
Well, Sharona, my wife, had been planning on Aliyah until we met. Back when we were ordained in 1983, there were not a lot of Reform congregations, and I was trained to be a congregational rabbi. And I didn't think my Hebrew was good enough to minister to the needs of Israelis in Hebrew. And from what I knew, people who didn't have congregations would take as many jobs as they could, because everyone was a few hours teaching here and a few hours teaching there and a few hours working for that organization and and I didn't want to do that. So she kind of put her dream on hold while I pursued my career. And she pursued her career as well. When she got the tenure at UAlbany in the library, she said, "We're not moving." So that's one of the reasons I stayed in Albany, because she had a good job with good benefits. I guess about 10 years ago, excuse me, we were here for probably a family bar mitzvah. And we'd gone out for breakfast, and I was sitting in an outdoor cafe. It was a beautiful day. I think it was in June. It was gorgeous 10 o'clock in the morning. I said, "It's gorgeous. We could retire here." And she said, "Yeah, we could." We had never really thought, or at least I had not thought about that. Lots of people go to Florida when they retire, at least from Albany. A lot of people go to Florida. We'd done Florida. And when we left Florida, she said, "If you want to go to South Florida, you go by yourself." We didn't like South Florida. So, I started thinking about the realities. We had 3 kids in the States, but, they went away to college and pretty much did their own life. And, they'd come back for holidays now and again, or we'd come for just to visit, maybe in Boston, because they were all in the Boston area. But then really about 6 years before I retired, this is going to be 2014, started really planning seriously for retiring here. What did that entail? Mm-hmm. The various physical pieces and financial pieces, and how it all works, and making Aliyah. And it's really easy to make Aliyah if you devote yourself to it. I retired 2 years before she did. And so I had 2 years to do the paperwork for Aliyah and plan the sale of our house and getting rid of the goods we didn't want to bring with us and moving over here. So that brought us over here. Why we wanted to come here? We like living in Jewish time, where, starting on, you go to the supermarket on Wednesday, the cashier wishes you Shabbat Shalom. And on Thursday, when you say goodbye to anybody, they wish you Shabbat Shalom. Sunday morning, everything is Shavua Tov. I go down to the gym in our building, Shavua Tov. I'll go to the Makolet, the convenience store, Shavua Tov. Everybody's living in Jewish time. Passover, everything seems like it's closed for 2 weeks. For the holidays, everything is celebrated here. So it's really nice to live that way, and not kind of be an afterthought at best.
Yeah. And what occupies your time other than getting ready to move to your new apartment? What occupies your time?
Well, we first came here. We came in on November 7th, 2022. We were in Airbnb for 7 weeks, and we found a place to live where we are now that we got a 2.5-year lease for. when we were still in the Airbnb, the government pays for Ulpan, for intensive Hebrew classes. So we had a number of phone numbers, and one was like a government Ulpan, so, as opposed to some of the private ones. And I called him and said, "Is there a placement test?" And she said, "Yeah, can you come in tomorrow?" Okay, we went in tomorrow. And she tested us orally, gave us some stuff to read aloud, and offered us, well, you can take level 5, and there'd be some text study in there, or level 6, which is all vocabulary. We've done text. Sharon has done text. She went to day school her whole life. I've certainly done my bunch of Bible and Mishnah and Midrash and Talmud and liturgy and modern poetry, all kinds of stuff. So we placed into this Kita Vav, level 6 class. And that was 2 days a week, 4 hours of class. We go from 8:30 to 10:30, break for half an hour, and then another 2 hours of class. After 4 hours of Hebrew class, we just come home and veg for the rest of the day. Our brains were dead.
Right.
We were dead. We eventually found out not only is it the only Hebrew Vav class in the whole country, it's the highest level in the whole country.
Uh-huh.
So we did it, and there were people who just stayed in it indefinitely. They'd keep paying for it. We didn't have to pay for it. If we wanted to pick it up again, we could go back and pay for it. But at this point, we encounter higher level Hebrew in our daily life. So I've had a root canal in Hebrew. I've had a colonoscopy in Hebrew. I've done a mortgage in Hebrew. That's the kind I get periodic texts from, whether it's my bank or my HMO or whatever, that I'm learning vocabulary and using a higher level vocabulary. Uh-huh. Also, I sit and get a weekly 10-minute Devar Torah sermon in the synagogue. Now, some of those people, as I said, are retired rabbis and they're good public speakers. Some of them are not such good public speakers. So they're either not loud enough, or they're too fast, or they're looking down at their paper, and I miss it. But I'm working on following a high-level spoken Hebrew. It's getting better. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing. We spend a lot of time, planning our meals and shopping for our meals. One day we do the supermarket about every 3 weeks. Excuse me. About every 3 weeks, we go to Machane Yehuda, the open air market, where we buy cheese and spices and vegetables.
And halva.
The halva we get periodically. Sharona makes a parve, a non-dairy halva ice cream.
Uh-huh.
That's out of this world. So we buy large amounts of halva to make that. So that's what we do. She is dancing 4 times a week. She does 2 belly dance classes in the morning, and 2 Israeli dance classes in the evening, or sessions, I should say. I was singing with a group. I'm not singing with a group anymore. I'm working on solo stuff. I perform now in public 4 times.
Uh-huh.
So, that's what I do to keep busy. We have family here. Her sister lives about a mile away, and when we move, we'll be 3 blocks away. We have 4 nieces and nephews here in Yerushalayim, and two in Tel Aviv. One the third Tel Aviv nephew is actually in Chicago now, possibly indefinitely. We've done a little bit of traveling, not as much as we'd like in Israel. We did a kind of a Taste of Galilee was the way it was billed, a 4-day bus trip, mostly Anglos put together by somebody we know from Albany, actually, who lives here now. And about 2 years ago, we did a 3.5-day wine tour of the Galilee. We like food and wine. So,
well, who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Well, there are people like that, I suppose. But so to get on a bus and have somebody do the driving so you can eat and drink, that's good.
Yeah, totally.
I like writing about my experience here. I write for my friends and whoever wants to read it. And that keeps me busy. We go to the gym now every day. We have a gym in our building. I shouldn't say we. Sharona goes dancing, so she doesn't go to the gym on the days that she's dancing. But I'm going usually 5 to 6 days a week. Yeah. Unless I have a morning appointment, generally a doctor's appointment of one kind or another. Getting to accomplish certain things takes sometimes many different doctors. So, Shona said I needed hearing aids. I couldn't hear. Uh-huh. So I go to my doctor. He says, "Oh, you should, go to an audiologist, go to an ear, nose, and throat." So it takes 4 to 6 months to get an appointment with the ear, nose, and throat person. So she says, "Okay, good. You need to get a hearing test." So then it takes a certain amount of time to get a hearing test, and you go back and say, "Well, yeah, but your left is worse than your right. We want to get an MRI to find out why your left is worse than your right."
Yeah.
So you get an appointment for an MRI, and they call you up beforehand to give you instructions, and they ask some questions. They want to know, do you have an EpiPen? And, well, yeah, I have an EpiPen. I'm allergic to bee stings. So, oh, well, we can't give you the MRI. In case you're allergic to the dye, we'll give you an MRI. We don't have an emergency room at our facility. So you got to go to a real hospital where they have that. So from the time the doctor wanted the MRI till I actually got it was 14 months.
Oh, Israeli medicine. So,
yeah, but it's cheap. I pay 116 shekel, about $40 a month for medical care.
Yeah. So that's Israeli medicine. All right. So let me ask you. I'm asking everybody as kind of the end of the discussion, the big picture question. You're there in retirement, but you're a citizen. You're part of the country. You daven at this. I don't know. Is it a Masorti synagogue?
Yes, a Masorti synagogue. Yeah.
So, what's your view? Your sense of how do you put it? How liberal Judaism, which is to say, non-Orthodox Judaism, is doing in Israel?
Well, there are. Three conservative synagogues at this end of town. And there are 2 Reform synagogues, one closer, the other one is further in. And because I'll drive on Shabbat, I've actually driven to the other one. I've been friendly with the cantor for a long time. The problem is they have a big floral centerpiece every Friday night, and I'm allergic to the pollen, so I don't want to sit there.
Which synagogue is that? The one you drive to?
That's Har'el.
Yeah. I'm interviewing her. I'm interviewing her on Tuesday. The reason it just occurred to me, I have an old congregant from my days in Columbia, Missouri, who is friendly with the cantor. I don't know why I made that connection, but yeah. So you go to your Har'el, but you're allergic to bees. You're allergic to pollen. What else?
Yeah. Well, I was miserable here the first year or two, and eventually they determined I was allergic to olive pollen.
Uh-huh.
In upstate New York, they don't check you for allergies to olive pollen. Also, outside our balcony, our porch here, is a main street, and within the surrounding blocks on either side, there are 8 different construction sites where they're either putting in infrastructure for sewage, where they're going to put the sidewalk when they put the light rail down the middle of the street, and other apartment buildings. They're knocking down a lot of older, like 50 or 60-year-old 3-story apartment buildings and building high rises. I'm in a building that has 25 flights above ground and 4 underground. So it's a 30-story building. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're building around here, is other 20, 30-story buildings, because there's a tremendous housing shortage.
Yeah. What neighborhood?
I'm in Arnona. I'm in what's called South Jerusalem. It's actually Southeast Jerusalem. It's not East Jerusalem, which is a different part of town.
Right.
But if you look at the map, I'm just north of Kibbutz Ramat Rachel. Uh-huh. And out my bedroom window are some fruit trees. They're not olive trees. I don't know. They have cherries there. They might have plums or something like that too. But from all the excavation for the construction, there's a lot of particulate matter that's in the air. So it's, clogging my system up here, my lungs, and God knows whatever. So I'm dealing with that.
All right.
And I hope to move to a neighborhood there where there's not so much construction.
Yirtzeh Hashem. All right, well, Don, I really thoroughly enjoyed this. I enjoyed talking to you after all these years, and it's an interesting life you led, and I'm glad that you gave us a little bit of it for this project. And I thank you very much. And Yirtzeh Hashem, inshallah, the next time I'm in town, we can get together in person in your new apartment.
A delight talking with you. I love looking back on my career, which I have not done a lot with. I retired 3 months into COVID. Uh-huh. So the end there was kind of all on Zoom. And it's certainly good to talk to you and think about some of those things. And I do hope to see you live in person next time you're here.
Yeah, she'll probably be in the fall. But meanwhile, next time you have a glass of wine, think of Orlinsky, and I'll do the same. We'll time to Harry Orlinsky.
No, with Harry Orlinsky, we would think of White Horse Scotch.
Okay.
When they translated the New Jewish Version, the JPS version of 1962 for the Torah and onward, they had White Horse Scotch on the table.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I remember him talking about that. They would get together up at JTS. There'd be 4 of them. Don't hang up. I want to tell you something. I'll tell you something when we get off the Zoom. All right. Anyway, thanks a lot, Don. And
you're welcome. Thanks for asking. Yeah. You can turn off the recording.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I invite you to stay tuned for future episodes, as with the help of my guests, I continue to unpack the diverse lives that rabbis lead. Special thanks to Steve Lubetkin of Lubetkin Communications for engineering this episode. You can reach me, Rabbi Phil Cohen, at rabbipodcast@gmail.com. Easy enough to remember. rabbipodcast, one word, @gmail.com. See you next time, and thanks a lot.